Anyone that's played a game has probably played a game in their portfolio. He's from Ubisoft, Ronnie Regev, and he's the senior manager of all of online for Ubisoft. And Ronnie, you guys are in the midst of the storm in one of the hottest product segments and industries that's going on today, you know, social gaming, and I think you're going to talk about some of the shift from your console-based to social-based games. So with that, Ronnie, pleasure.
Thank you. Hi. Hi, so my name is Ronnie Regev. I'm the Senior Manager of Online for Ubisoft North America. My team and I oversee the design, implementation, and support of all of Ubisoft's online or public-facing systems. It's quite a big job. It's a lot of fun. So, so I'm Ronnie, and I work for Ubisoft. So Ubisoft is, for people who don't know what we do, the third or fourth largest video game developer and publisher in the world. We make a lot of games every year for whatever type of platform or medium you could possibly think of. We will either develop or publish games for that. So some of the games that we make, some of them are very well known, and so there's a bunch of them here that are listed. So some of our bigger brands like Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell, Prince of Persia, Ghost Recon Online, or Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, and some of our web-based games are social network games like CSI Crime City, Smurfs & Co. The main point about Ubisoft, or one of the main principles of the company, is that we consider ourselves to be a creative powerhouse and encouraging creativity at all levels of the company, from the development side, being able to explore new technologies, explore new development techniques, learn and develop competencies and skills in-house. It's one of the main, ethoses of the company, or one of the main principles of the company, and it's important for everybody who works in the company to sort of encourage that and to facilitate that. And that's a message that I'll be coming back to a couple times throughout my presentation. So why are we here today? Well, we're here today to talk about cloud computing, RightScale, and how the combination of the two have been or will be disruptive to all of our respective businesses. And I do mean disruptive because for somebody who comes from a traditional IT background, it is very disruptive. Right? Shadow IT, rogue IT, or whatever you want to call it. The combination of the two is it's not a bit of a game changer, it is an absolute game changer. So I'm here, right? I'm going to do that today by sharing the experiences that we've had at Ubisoft. How we've come to use cloud computing, or Amazon Web Services in particular, and RightScale to power our social network games, and how the combination of the two have enabled Ubisoft to push into a new market segment for us. Social network games are huge. We're a traditional game developer that needs to get into this space. Well, there's tons of money to be made there, and we're a big corporation, and we like making money. So. So the approach I'm taking is a bit of a narrative. I'm going to walk through how we started with social games, how we got introduced to hosting social games on Amazon with RightScale, where we're at now, and where we're going. So, in the beginning, right? About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, January 2010, I had shifted into a different area of the company's operations. I went from the business side to online. Seemed like a cool and interesting place to work, so I shifted there, and the social game space was heating up, and Ubisoft decided to jump in. So I was in Paris for sort of meet and greet, meet some new colleagues and whatnot, that type of a trip. And I met with some game producers and some developers, and they said, hey, we want to make social network games, and you work in IT, and you guys know all about hosting stuff, so can you help us host these games? So yeah, sure, no problem. Of course we could do that. You know, that's what we do. We help people within the company host their applications and their games and whatever it is that they want to do. So what did we do? Like a traditional IT group with a traditional IT mindset, we tried to gather all of the requirements, and we built, rather than reusing some of our existing shared hosting platforms or some of our legacy systems, which we probably could have done sufficiently, maybe not as well as we'd wanted to, we decided to build a specific platform for hosting these social network games with predetermined dev and UAT and QA and staging and production environments, so that people could just develop their games, drop it into the different pools, and launch games. It'd be awesome. New hosting infrastructure and one stack to rule them all. So we bought a bunch of hardware, went through that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 month provisioning and approval and racking and installation period. Bought a bunch of Dell R910s with some direct attached storage, threw on VMware ESXi as the hypervisor, and we defined one stack for everybody. So the OS, the application server, the development framework, the database version, and the caching layer. Right? Like this is, dev teams. This is what you have to work with. You need to work in that box of a typical LAMP stack. Well, you may be asking yourself this question, or if you're not, you can ask yourself this question. What if you're a producer and all of the developers in your team don't want to write their game in PHP, their application code? What if you want to use a different database management system? You don't want to use MySQL. Well, sorry boys, you're out of luck. Go somewhere else. And that's how you push people towards Shadow IT, as Michael was mentioning, right? And Stephen as well. So really what happened? Well, our solution worked for some people. We did launch some games that were relatively successful, given that we were just as like R&D and proof of concept type work. They're relatively successful. It worked for some teams and not for others. For the people that it didn't work well for, well, they went elsewhere. They took their business elsewhere. And we also realized that it took us a very long time to provision hardware, very long time to provision infrastructure, and we needed to look at things differently. So what are some of the lessons we learned from that? Well, obviously these games could be a lot bigger than what we had expected. We needed to be a lot more flexible, use different tools to be able to deploy and manage our infrastructure. Don't inhibit, facilitate. By standardizing on one stack, we were preventing developers from being creative. That's contradictory to the mindset and the mentality of this company. Don't inhibit creativity. Let developers, not let because it's a very odd way of putting it, but don't prevent the creative powers in this company from doing what they need to do and doing what they do best. But on the other hand, if you have to support an endless number of components and letting people choose whatever they want, it becomes difficult from an IT side to support all of that in the long term. Sort of like the touchdown, we deployed an application, touchdown, it works, but when it's in live operations, you do need to consider how it's supported and how it's going to scale and whatnot. There are a couple of other ideas, things that have sort of come to mind. It's that I haven't really shared beyond casual conversation, and that's that our methods of working were not well suited for the challenges we were facing, especially if the company wanted to make a serious go at social games. And, well, we'd be in deep trouble if these games became successful, and of the 8,000 or 9,000 developers that work at our company, if half of them were tasked with developing social games, well, we'd be in a lot of trouble. And then, so as I was saying, so some teams were sort of turned off, and they went their own route, and they contacted their, Amazon, or they deployed their applications on, using Google App Engine. And so about, a year and a half after that, one of the groups that had said thanks but no thanks in not such nice terms, contacted me as a production team in our San Francisco office. Contacted me and said, hey, listen, we have this game that's been in development for a couple of months, and we're deploying it in a month. It's a social network game bound for Facebook based on the show CSI. We need to launch the game. It's supposed to go out in 30 days. We're having a tremendous number of performance, availability, and stability problems. You guys are an IT group. You have all of these different skills and competencies in your group, in your team. Can you help us? So yeah, sure, no problem, boys. Let's go. How can we help you out? What are you doing? What are you using? How can we help make this game work well? Well, the game itself and the stack it was on wasn't that unique or new. It was typical LAMP. It was developed in PHP with a MySQL backend, was leveraging Memcache a bit. But what was unique and different was the combination of Amazon Web Services and this thing called RightScale. So that was completely new to us, but we dove into it. sorry, I'm sort of behind on my slides while I'm just speaking. So what did we do, right? So what did we do? And well, I've been trying to think of different ways to explain what we did, and ultimately it was a whirlwind time, and well, we just took care of business. We spent a lot of time with the development team revising the calls between the different application stacks, so between their app servers and the databases, how the load balancers were configured, optimizing slow queries in our databases, and I got the 5-minute warning sign, so I'm going to speed through a couple of my other slides. So, well, what happened? The game blew up in a good way. It did very well. It proved the model for Ubisoft that we can develop and launch social network games. And we're using this new tool called RightScale, which has helped us do a lot of this stuff. We couldn't provision 175 servers in 40 days doing it the way we used to. We would have never been able to do it, probably. The game went from within about, I don't know, I think like 45 days to about 2.3, 2.4 million monthly active users, 400,000 plus daily active users, and concurrent users up to 50,000, which was much bigger than a lot of our, much bigger than a lot of our other applications that we've had in the past. The 175 servers for a company like us isn't that big, but one application with that requires 175 servers is way bigger than anything we had before. So what are some of the lessons? Well, it was bigger than we had thought, and there's no going back, right? We couldn't go back to the way we were managing infrastructure specifically for our social games. It wouldn't work. If we tried to do that, we'd either force everybody to go away from IT, and then, which we didn't want, or we would force people to do whatever they wanted to do, but we wouldn't be available to help them, and we wouldn't be able to help the company succeed. You know, shadow IT or rogue IT or not, at the end of the day, we all work for the same company. We want to make really good games that people love playing, and on the back end, if they make a lot of money, that's great too, but we want people to really like the products that we develop. So, and now, well, right, so what's happening now? Well, this is a couple months later, 10 or 13 months since we've become engaged with RightScale. We started working with RightScale. We have 3 live games. We've got about a half dozen more in the pipeline. Seems okay, so it's a good amount, but what's interesting about it is that the approach is completely different. Each one of these games that's in our pipeline uses a mix and match different stack. So we pretty much standardize across HA proxy as our front-end load balancers. Application servers, they vary. We have either Apache or Nginx or Tomcat, basically whatever our dev teams want to use, awesome. Whatever you're good at developing in, great, that's cool, do it. The backend, databases or data store, well, we're not just going to say only use MySQL. You know, that's, oops, well, skip to that anyway. So we're not just going to say only use MySQL. We've developed a lot more competencies in NoSQL. So you want to use MongoDB, awesome. Here are the templates. Here's the cluster configuration that we've spent some time setting up, built off of all the RightScale templates, and it's optimized, and here you go. We can deploy it for you, and it'll work. MySQL slave replication, awesome, that'll work too. You want to use Membase, all right, let's do that too. If that's what's most appropriate, the most apt solution for the game and for its intentions, great. Well, we're easily able to handle peaks of 10 million MAU and 1 million DAU and 30 days or less for some of our games. It is very intense when some of our games go to that sort of spike in traffic. It's not as easy as it may seem. It takes a lot of work, but we are able to do that with our games, and that's what's important. That means that the million people a day who want to play some of our games can. The game isn't going to be offline. The performance isn't going to be terrible. People can play these games, and that's what's most important. So how are we becoming successful? Oh, so I think the ordering of some of this stuff is a little bit off. So how are we becoming successful? What are some of the tools within RightScale that we're using to really how are we taking advantage of the RightScale platform to facilitate the launch of these games? Well, we're taking advantage of schedule and resource-based scaling, specifically on our application servers. So initially, we would provision for peak capacity, for peak user traffic. So if we were expecting, I don't know, 500,000 daily active users, well, we'd maybe provision 30 application servers and run those 24/7, and they would cost whatever they would cost. And then, well, it works, but it's not a very efficient use of resources. So as we gain more experience and comfort with the RightScale platform, we've started to move towards time-based scaling, and now resource-based scaling, so that we're able to provision we're able to auto scale up to what we need when we need it and go back down when we no longer need those resources. Scripted deployments via the RightScale API. So our actual content deployment for our games is leveraging the RightScale API to push out to our application servers. Logical grouping into deployments, hugely important for us to understand what each, be it a QA or dev or UAT or production environment, what does that consist of? And also from a cost visibility perspective, which as an IT guy, unfortunately, I spend a little too much of my time dealing with our Amazon and RightScale invoices, but it's part of it. It's part of the job. But being able to group the logical grouping into deployments is very beneficial for us and our finance group as far as rebilling and booking costs of different projects, be they in development or in production and live operations, knowing which costs for the dev environment, well, that needs to go to this studio in that city. For 3 months, the costs go there, and production, the costs go to the live operations group in wherever they may be. So really, we're not quite there yet. A lot of things work very well, but we're really not quite there yet. So one of the main things, so some of the areas that we want to focus on in our team is that push button deployment. So what was up there before, I saw that, and I went to speak to John, who's in the corner over there, and I said, John, that's awesome. I want it now, please. I want to be able to offer to our development teams self-service. They're still kind of going through IT, but self-service, self-provisioning. You still have the cost oversight. You still have that oversight and cost, and some of the quality assurance that you may get with a traditional IT group. But it's self-service, completely self-service. You know, suit yourself. Launch provision what you need to provision. Extending that catalog of mix and match stacks. So having optimized configurations and templates for whatever kind of stack any development team wants to use, and not say, no, sorry, we can't really offer that, or sorry, learn a different language. And all of this, there's my focus on. By being able to focus initially on the top two, ultimately what we want to focus on, or what I would like my team to be focusing on going forward, is trend spotting, looking at the resource utilization across all of our applications and improving that, optimizing configurations, resource usage, and where time is spent also within the team. Cost reduction, because we can scale up, but at a certain point, once the traffic stabilizes or a game is sunsetting, we need to scale down, and we need to optimize our costs, because it's not really feasible or realistic to have games running at, let's say, $40,000, $50,000 a month when they're not bringing in that kind of revenue. And ultimately, the most important thing, right, is getting back to working closer with our developers, right? So working with them hand in hand in developing applications, and not just provisioning servers, but actually working with them to optimize how their applications work, and being able to take some of those responsibilities, so that at the end of the day, the people who work at Ubisoft can focus on building really cool, creative, beautiful, fun games, and not have to worry about, man, I got to provision and install that application server, but I don't know how to set up IP tables, and how do I set up my firewall? No, the build awesome games, focus on the creative stuff, and let some of the guys in ITs do some of that heavy lifting. So that's all I got for everybody today. I hope I didn't run too long over. So thank you. Have a good day.